Today we are taking a look at section 2.5. Before getting into the more specific problems and examples, we must learn interval notation. There are 4 different types of interval notation, and they all indicate whether or not the interval is closed, open, or halfway open. This first one is closed, and you can tell that it's closed because it has brackets around it. The second is open due to having parentheses, and the last 2 are halfway open because they have 1 parenthesis and 1 bracket. Looking over here at the inequality equations, if it is closed, you'll see that it will be a less than and greater than or equal to sign, and if it's open, it will just be a greater or less than sign, and halfway open, it'll have 1 of each. These inequality symbols also indicate what it will look like on a number line or graph. Now looking at these examples for interval notation. This first one is negative infinity, comma 2. We know that this is halfway open due to 1 bracket and 1 parentheses. So, taking a look at the graph for this example, we can see that the line stops at 2 and it's closed, and then it continues to negative infinity to the left. Now taking a look at example number 2, we can see that it's negative 3, comma infinity, and since it has parentheses on both sides, we know that it's an open graph. So if you were to put this on a number line, it would be open at negative 3 and continue to the right to infinity. This last example is negative infinity, comma infinity, with parentheses on both sides, so we know it's an open graph. On the number line, it would just simply be this, a line going both directions, since it goes to negative infinity and infinity. Now we're going to talk about compound inequality. And the definition of that would be when 2 or more inequalities are joined together. So as an example, there's B is less than C is less than D. And basically that's just one big inequality made up from 2 smaller ones. So this would be broken up to B is less than C, and then C is less than D. Before we get into the more specific examples for this section, I wanted to give a helpful tip to you guys, and it's to always remember to reverse the inequality symbol when multiplying or dividing by a negative. That is very important because that will not only mess up how your inequality looks on a number line, but it will mess up what your answer comes out to be. So it would just be reversing this inequality symbol, the less than or greater than sign. Now we're going to take a look at example number 1. And it would be to solve negative 5 is less than or equal to 2x minus 1 less than or equal to x plus 7. So for this one, we're going to break it up into 2 different inequalities since it's a compound inequality. So you would just basically cut it off where it would be 1 inequality symbol for one equation and then 1 for the other. So for this side we would have negative 5 is less than or equal to 2x minus 1, and then for this side you would have 2x minus 1 is less than or equal to x plus 7. And then you just solve by combining like terms and getting x by itself, so eventually you'll get negative 2 is less than or equal to x, and x is less than or equal to 8. So combining that, you get negative 2 is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to 8. And since we have the less than or equal to signs on both sides of the x, we know that it's going to be a closed interval. So you would put negative 2 comma 8 in brackets. And taking a look at the number line for this, it would simply just be closed and stopped at the value of negative 2 and 8, and anything in between there would be your interval. Now for example number 2. This one is different than number 1 since we only have 1 variable in the middle. So you can't break it up into 2 different inequalities since we only have 1. So what we're going to have to do for this problem is basically get rid of every number in the middle and distribute it out to the outside and get x by itself in the middle. So we'll have to minus 4 from everything, so minus 4 from negative 2, 4 minus 3x, and 6. And after that, divide everything by negative 3. So you'll end up with negative 2 over 3 is less than x is less than 2. Since the inequality symbols do not have the equal to sign under them, we know it's going to be an open graph. So you would write it in parentheses like this, negative 2 over 3, comma 2. And the graph would simply look like this. It's open at negative 2 over 3 and continues until it hits 2, where it's open again. At example number 3, this one is definitely more complex than the other ones. Because we have x to the 4th power minus x to the 3rd minus 12x squared is greater than 4x plus 10. So instead of algebraically solving it and going through all that hard work and getting our hands all cramped, what we're going to have to do is just graph this. So first step, you need to get everything on the left side so it can have sort of like equal to 0 on the other side. So after that, you just minus 4x and then you minus 10. So you get all of that is greater than 0. Now, the way you plug this into your calculator is you're going to take this entire left side and put it in for y1, and you're going to put 0 in for y2. And you just graph it. And I think the standard zoom window, so zoom 6 will work fine. Once you graph that, you'll have to do the x-intercept method, so find where 0 crosses with the equation. And after that, on the graph, you just go to like this value, you see where it cuts off right after 4, and then this one right after negative 3. And the calculator gives you these exact answers of negative 2.97 and 4.21. And since the line continues this way for that side and that way for that one, you know it's going to be negative infinity and infinity. Now moving on to example number 4. This one does have x squared, but it is a quadratic, so we don't have to graph this one. I mean, you can if you want to, but we can easily solve this by using the quadratic formula. So, quadratic formula is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So basically you just plug in the values for that, and you simplify and combine like terms, and eventually you get negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 17 all over 2, which that is two answers, being negative 3 plus and negative 3 minus the value. So for your interval, it would be negative 3 minus the square root of 17 all over 2 is less than or equal to x less than or equal to negative 3 plus the square root of 17 over 2. Now, when you graph this, it may be harder to get these exact values. You're going to come out with some like decimal answer, but this is what the graph would look like. It would stop right before 1 and negative 4. But like I said before, it's way easier to do the quadratic formula way, so that way you can get these exact answers. Now number 5 is very similar to example number 3, where we had the big value of x to the 4th power. And we kind of have it again right here. I mean, you would have to go through all of that and distribute everything, which would take a little while. So, a faster way of solving this problem would be just to plug it in, and once again you would plug this left side in for y1 and the 0 in for y2. And when you graph it, it's going to be a graph that's shaped like that, but your interval is going to be in between the two lines that continue going straight up, if that makes sense. So basically where those points end would be the numbers for your interval. So right here it continues straight up at negative 6, and over here continues straight up at 3. And it would be a closed interval in brackets, because we see right here it's a less than or equal to sign. Alright, now moving on to our last example for this section, which is an application problem. So I'll read it. A projectile is fired straight upward from ground level with initial velocity of 160 feet per second. Its height in feet after x seconds is modeled by f of x equals negative 16x squared plus 160x. And this part is what they're basically asking us. What answer they want. What time interval will the height of the projectile be greater than 336 feet? So the way we're going to solve this, basically, is doing what it said. It's asking when it will be greater than 336 feet. So we're going to take our f of x equation right here and put it into the left side. And since it says what will be greater than, we're going to put a greater than sign, and then 336. Now the only way to solve this would be to graph it. So once again we're going to put all of our values to the left side and put 0 on the right. And when you graph this, you're just going to get a straight line like this. You're basically just going to find out where it stops. So right here it stops at 3 and stops at 7. So your answer would be between 3 and 7 seconds. Alright, well this is the end of section 2.5. I hope you enjoyed this video and it has helped you a little bit, and hopefully you were able to take something away that will either help you with this section or in the future. Thanks for watching.